Have you ever considered that the deadliest individual in the room isn't the loud aggressor, but the silent observer who has finally reached their limit? Stay tuned, because the psychological breakthroughs of Carl Jung regarding the human spirit will fundamentally alter your perspective on sensitive souls forever. Jung theorized that every human soul harbors a blend of light and hidden shadows. However, in the case of the misunderstood empath, this internal polarity flickers with a ferocity that most people cannot comprehend. Modern society frequently mistakes deep feeling for fragility, assuming that a person who cares intensely must be simple to crush. Yet Jung's observations reveal a reality far more intricate and significantly more intimidating. The empath is never truly weak. They are merely practicing immense restraint. You must understand that the human mind functions in distinct strata. According to Jungian theory, the persona, our social shield, frequently masks our core identity. But what occurs when an individual gifted with extreme emotional awareness discards that shield? That is the moment the shadow archetype takes control. And what Jung mapped out concerning this shadow will stun you. Empaths inhabit what Jung described as the friction of opposites. They absorb agony profoundly, yet they possess the stamina to contain it. They spot dishonesty instantly, yet they persist in searching for the goodness in others. This is not foolishness. It is what Jung identified as the transcendent function, the rare psychological capacity to balance clashing truths simultaneously. However, this gift carries a heavy burden. A healed empath is a narcissist's most terrifying realization. For those who use others, this serves as a quiet alarm, because the empath who has survived betrayal and psychological warfare does not remain a victim. They transform. Jung argued that the most mentally robust people are those who confront their own darkness and emerge unified. Sensitive people endure this internal forge much sooner and more painfully than the average person. Their emotional scars compel them to mature faster, think deeper, and live more intentionally. They don't just grasp the concept of light. This is exactly where the manipulator makes a ruinous error. They witness the empath's generosity and misinterpret it as a lack of spine. They imagine they can dominate someone who is so emotionally transparent. But Jung discovered that those who prioritize compassion often develop the most resilient mental frameworks. Why is this? Because they were forced to. They had to construct that inner fortress stone by stone just to survive their environment. And this is the point where the entire narrative flips. Jung's concept of individuation suggests that every soul must eventually meet its true, raw self. For most, this evolution is stagnant or non-existent. But for the sensitive person, betrayal serves as a rocket fuel for growth. This is the shift that manipulators never anticipate. Being emotionally tuned in isn't a flaw, it is high-level pattern recognition. Empaths don't just experience feelings, they decipher them like code. They process them. They catalog every deception, every slight, every moment of gaslighting. Not with a desire for vengeance, but with surgical precision. They gather this data until a critical mass is reached, triggering what Jung called the manifestation of the self. Carl Jung noted that the most significant personal evolutions happen during seasons of intense pressure. He termed this enantiodromia, the principle that when a force is pushed to its absolute limit, it inevitably transforms into its polar opposite. Consequently, the empath who was once endlessly tolerant becomes a wall of granite. The one who sacrificed without thought becomes intensely guarded. The person who excused every mistake begins to walk away without looking back. This isn't malice, it is spiritual alignment. Jung taught that authentic power is birthed when we incorporate our shadow, when we stop ignoring our limits and start defending them. The empath doesn't lose their capacity to love, they simply find their backbone. And here is the detail that will truly change your outlook. Once the sensitive soul wakes up to their inherent authority, they don't just recover. They rewrite the rules of their entire social circle. The old games no longer function. The guilt trips fail to stick. The masks of others crumble. And the empath stands tall, fully cognizant of their identity and their worth. According to Jung, There is a massive gap between being a slave to your reactions and being the master of your responses. Most individuals live through their trauma. They strike out. They seek to inflict the same hurt they once received. But a matured empath, someone who has walked through the flames and gained awareness, operates on a higher plane. They move through what Jung called conscious intent. They have no urge to ruin the person who harmed them because they have already triumphed over a far more difficult enemy, their own internal chaos. Jung famously noted that the ultimate triumph isn't besting others, but mastering the parts of yourself that would drag you down into the mud. This is the moment the manipulator finally sees their mistake. Those who control others rely on predictable cycles. They want you to pursue them, to explain yourself, to plead for understanding, or to keep the conflict alive. But when an empath achieves what Jung called psychological self-rule, the game is over. Jung realized that the most influential stance in any relationship isn't power through force. It is the detachment that comes from seeing through the illusion, not a silence born of terror, but a withdrawal born of absolute clarity. You no longer need to participate in the drama. The awakened soul doesn't hide because they are broken. They leave because they are finished. This is the exact moment where your entire understanding of strength begins to pivot. Based on Jung's research into personality archetypes, empaths possess a dominant feeling function. But do not mistake this for being overly emotional. It is actually emotional accuracy, the talent for spotting gaps in logic, sensing a lie before it is even spoken, and knowing what others are desperately trying to conceal. But here is the revelation Jung pointed out. When that deep intuition merges with hard-earned perspective, it produces something miraculous. The empath stops being a reactor and starts being a strategist. They no longer move from a place of hurt. They begin to move from a position of authority. And the change that follows is nothing short of a revolution. Jung had a specific term for this state: the transcendent function. It is the ability to endure internal pressure without snapping, to witness the dark side of humanity without becoming cynical, to feel the weight of the world and still choose logic over hysteria. Of Comega, when a sensitive person survives repeated betrayal and chooses to refine themselves rather than harden, they reach a level of consciousness most will never touch. This is what Jung meant by becoming a whole individual, becoming complete within your own skin. The self-actualized empath no longer hunts for external validation to feel significant. They believe their own eyes without needing a second opinion. They stop pursuing affection from those who lack the depth to give it. They stop performing kindness for those who only know how to take. And here is the part that will send a shiver down your spine. Jung wrote about a phenomenon called psychological mirroring. Empaths naturally project back the emotions of those around them. That is why people feel so comforted in their presence. However, when an empath has been pushed, used, and lied to one too many times, the mirror changes. They stop reflecting warmth and start reflecting the truth. They no longer soak up the toxicity. They see the superficial charm, the hollow apologies, and the loops of manipulation, and they shine a light on all of it, not with fury, but with cold, hard facts. And truth, as Jung discovered, is the most lethal weapon against a lie. When a person buries their true needs and their true strength for too long, it doesn't eventually explode in a fit of rage. It emerges as a calm, terrifying clarity. The empath who once bent over backward becomes a mountain. They don't argue anymore, they decide. They don't offer long explanations, they take action. They don't try to fix what is fundamentally broken, they simply exit the building. This isn't coldness, it is the process of individuation in real time. This is the transition Jung warned about. The moment an individual claims their shadow, recognizes their value, and seizes their own kingdom. And here is the final epiphany. The shadow isn't just a container for your flaws, it is also the home of your untapped potential. The empath's real power was never just their kindness. It was everything they were afraid to be until this very second. For the sensitive, the shadow doesn't just hold anger. It holds the power of the word no, the courage to walk away, and the refusal to be played. Betrayal is the specific catalyst that forces them to integrate these hidden parts they once suppressed for the sake of harmony. Carl Jung found that merging with the shadow doesn't make you a worse person, it makes you a wiser one. Empaths don't stop loving, they just become incredibly surgical about who receives that love. They realize their energy isn't a commodity for everyone to consume. It is a sacred resource. It must be earned. What develops next is what Jung called the realized self, and it is completely invincible. Jung once remarked that the most formidable people are not those who act out of trauma, but those who have converted their trauma into insight. This is the path of the awakened. They have seen the worst of humanity. They have felt the sting of disloyalty, and instead of shattering, they crystallized. True power isn't the absence of feeling, but sensitivity governed by wisdom. They understand the mechanics of control because they lived through them. They see the gaslighting because they broke the spell. They can smell a predator from a mile away because they used to be the prey. This isn't hypervigilance. It is what Jung called earned wisdom. And this is where the change becomes permanent. According to Jungian development, there is a point in a person's life where they stop looking for their missing pieces in other people and find them within themselves. For the betrayed empath, this isn't just a recovery, it's a total shift in power. They stop justifying why they need boundaries. They stop apologizing for existing. They reach a state of psychological sovereignty, total ownership of their own spirit. But the final stage of this journey is something even more profound. Jung called it the return to the center. It is beautiful because real strength isn't being heartless, it is being refined. The fully conscious empath is the living proof of this paradox. They still feel everything, but they love with a filter. They still understand the world, but they engage it on their own terms. They still forgive the past, but they never forget the lesson. Jung believed the most balanced humans are those who can hold their light and their shadow in the same hand. The transformed empath has learned how to be soft for the worthy and sharp for the entitled. They have mastered the art of the perfect response, no longer reacting from a wound, but acting from a place of peace. And here is the truth that makes them dangerous to the status quo. According to Jung, the peak of human development is when you no longer need anyone else to make you feel whole. The empath achieves this not by building walls, but by finding their own center. They don't stay in the water with people who refuse to swim. They don't chase those who want to be lost. They don't pour their heart into the void. They have mastered what Jung called the conscious bond, engaging only where there is respect and a fair exchange of energy. Once a sensitive soul reaches this height, no one, not a narcissist, not a liar, and certainly not their own history, can ever break them again. The final product is the individuated empath, and they are the most powerful force you will ever meet. Jung said that when a person settles their debt with their shadow and emerges complete, they become like a force of nature, not aggressive, not loud, but completely unmovable. The awakened empath doesn't want revenge because they have outgrown the people who hurt them. They don't need your approval because they know their own value by heart. They don't fear being alone because they actually like the person they've become. They are what Jung called psychologically finished. These people have taken their deepest agony and forged it into their greatest asset. They are dangerous because they can no longer be fooled, bought, or broken, and that, according to Jung's life work, is the one thing a manipulator cannot handle, someone who has learned to love themselves with the same intensity they once used to love everyone else. This is the transition from victim to ruler. It isn't just healing, it is the hero's journey of the mind, a descent into the dark, a fight with the shadow, a reclamation of power, and a total rebirth. Jung found that pain, when met with awareness, becomes the gold of wisdom. They are proof of Jung's greatest law. Within every wound is the seed of a new beginning. This is the mind of the awakened empath. Once you see it, you will never doubt the power of someone who has turned their suffering into their strength. If this resonated with you, like the video and mention Winds of Thought in the comments. Share this with a friend who feels too much. Remember, You didn't just survive, you evolved.